The May 2022 Unfound Newsletter. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody had a great April. I know I did. I played some nice disc golf. I spent a lot of beautiful nights on my balcony getting work done. I started making some plans for later this year, getting together with friends, planning to go to some concerts, etc. And my dad will be here in a couple days. I'm flying up to Pennsylvania on May 2nd to drive him back to Florida on Tuesday. We'll see how that goes. This newsletter will be a bit different from all the others because I only have one topic on my mind, and it comes from the recent update episode. But first, upcoming episodes. May 6th, Douglas Crawford. May 13th, Rhonda Smith. May 20th, Ryan Stuka. Others we are working on: Billy Bragg and Ralph Belvedere's, Diana Alejandre's, Kayla Croft Payne's disappearance, Belinda Brewster's disappearance, and Daniel Scott's disappearance. Okay, let's get to it. Well, during the update episode volume 11, I was practically forced to talk about what is transpiring right now with Chance Engelbert's case. A PI, a private investigator from another state, a former politician, that's almost not a surprise, has decided to get involved. She has gone after Chance's wife. She has made a lot of statements like, I'm a bulldog, I got onto something, and when I get onto something, and I never let go, that's paraphrased. Doing interviews, all I guess due to the belief that Chance was murdered. If this reminds you of Phil Klein and others, you're not crazy. And this will ultimately be what this blog is about. However, regarding Chance's disappearance specifically, just so all of you know where I'm coming from, I am totally open to the idea someone murdered Chance. Hey, I'm the guy who is now known for saying relationships are the number one cause of disappearances, and Chance seemed to be having issues in his marriage and with his in-laws, certainly. Yet there is no proof of murder, nada, zero. In fact, if we were to start lining up the reasons to believe Chance walked off compared to him being murdered, the list for Chance walking off would be a lot longer. Still, maybe he was murdered. The question then is, why is it when alleged professionals, private investigators, retired police officers, former agents, etc., get involved with disappearances, why do they lose their minds? Why do they automatically jump to those theories which have the least amount of proof? And even more so, why do they voice their opinions so publicly and don't realize they sound crazy? Before you think I'm overstating this, think about these disappearances. Tom Brown, the main PI, believes Tom was murdered. No proof of that after 5 years of work. Chance Engelbert, the main PI, is putting a camera in his wife's face. Jennifer Kesse, multiple independent investigators have been very public with the theory that a landscaper in her complex murdered her, yet they've offered no proof. Mara Murray, do I even need to go into this one with the people who have been seriously involved, who have made idiots of themselves over the past 15 years? Chip Campbell, I had a dog handler, this is a true story, who got involved with this disappearance, who started sending me emails saying he had recordings of me making anti-Semitic jokes with Chip's family. Yes, really, that happened. Jonathan Estes. His family got ripped off for $10,000 by a private investigator licensed who just as recently as like 2 years ago was doing interviews as if he were still on the case, which he wasn't. And those are just the instances I know off the top of my head. I'm sure if you Google the topic, you will find many, many circumstances exactly like these. So the question, why? Is this just a factor of humans being humans? Is this just the squeaky wheels getting all the attention? What is going on? I'm going to try to answer all of it in this blog/newsletter. Hey, I like tough jobs, but I think I'm the perfect person to write on such a topic because not so long ago, I was totally outside the missing persons community. Yes, I did a lot of reading on web sleuths and elsewhere, and I've been interested in disappearances for a long time now. Meaning I have a clear memory of what it's like to be totally outside, then to become totally inside. much like what I think is going on here. Yet I came into it without all the craziness that these people have. Moreover, I think as things have continued with Unfound, I've gotten even less sensational, not more, contrary to these types of people I'll be discussing. Why? Is it just a matter of a lot of bad people taking advantage of others? I think it's more than that. Mainly because most of the people who end up acting like this have no criminal records. They've never filed for bankruptcy. They've never been in civil court. In fact, many of these cases, in many of these cases, these people are licensed to do exactly what they were doing. And they've never had their licenses revoked. So what the heck? Then what is it? It's a combo of topics that I will discuss further, and they are listed this way because I think this is the progression these people go through from becoming decent human beings to becoming carnival barkers. Number 1, public perception of disappearances versus reality. Number 2, knowledge versus experience. And number 3, pride versus truth. Let's start with the first one. Perception versus reality. I can write about this topic as well as anyone because, as I stated above, it wasn't that long ago I hadn't covered 250 disappearances, that I didn't produce 299 episodes, that I wasn't speaking to criminal justice majors. It was all just yesterday, it seems. So in the past 5.5 years, what have I discovered I had wrong about disappearances as a civilian? And I'm using my own experiences not because they're my own, because I don't think I was that much different than any of you. First, although I surely got it right that a majority of disappearances are murders, I couldn't have guessed that a majority of those are caused by relationships. Instead, my perception just 6 years ago was that these disappearance murders were more of a drug money power thing. In addition to that, I thought many of the female disappearances were more random occurrences than violence committed by the men in their lives. Why did I think that? Probably the way murders themselves are reported and what the public is told about murders. What do I mean? The average citizen knows about serial killers. Why? Because there have been about 1 million documentaries and shows done on the original Night Stalker, the Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, etc. And what do all these killers pretty much have in common? They killed strangers or people they knew for only a very, very short time. This is the main reason I think the public thinks most crimes, not just murders, are stranger-on-stranger violence. But that's not true. Likewise, the other way the general public hears about murders is through news about inner city / urban violence. And what does the public think? Minorities, gangs, drugs, etc. And that is often true, but not necessarily so. Yet most importantly, neither has anything to do with relationships, mainly intimate relationships. People who are married, people who are having sex, people who are having affairs, people who are getting divorced. None of it. But the FBI stats will tell you the serial killers and the urban violence are the smaller part of the murder pie, not the larger, despite the reporting being otherwise. But because the average person is not an expert in crime and may not take an interest in crime stats, the average person will believe serial killers and gangs kill the most people because of all the coverage. Not true. Not even close to true. So to me, this plays a huge role in this entire topic. Why? Because at one point, whether it's when we're 10 or 25 or 46 or 51 or 80, we are on the outside of this. And then at some point, some of us get on the inside. And the question is, what are you going to do once you get inside? Are you going to continue to hold to your prior uninformed beliefs, or will you have the courage to change them? Next topic, knowledge versus experience. I should maybe retitle this section, knowledge / no experience / very little experience versus a lot of experience. And when I say experience, I mean experience involving actual disappearances. I'll get to that in a moment. This section once again goes back to my own life. Not the past 5.5 years of Unfound, but going back to 2009 when I became kind of a point man for Stephen Kocher's disappearance. Or going way back to when I joined the first forum for the FindJody.com site. Or going way back to the 1970s and watching In Search Of as a 7-year-old. All of it from 1977 to 2016, as much time as I spent reading about disappearances and taking part in the Kocher search, and I spent a lot of time because I don't have any kids, I'm a single guy, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. All of it is like a teaspoon of water compared to the oil tanker-sized experience I've gotten since 2016. But here's the key. I didn't know all those years were a teaspoonful until I started experiencing the oil tanker full. No idea. I could have never guessed it. Yet I came into doing Unfound because I wanted to learn. Moreover, once I got to a point where I started to get a feel for disappearances, I wanted to pass that along to others, all of you. And in that way, we all continued to learn together. So I had a lot of knowledge before 2016, but of course, I had no experience. And experience counts for something. And what I mean by experience is actually being in a position where I'm responsible for a disappearance by covering them. I become partly responsible for the solution to them. That certainly puts the pressure on, and it is what makes the difference between someone who looks at true crime as entertainment and the rest of us who see it as work. Got to remember, when you go to a concert, it's your entertainment, but it's the musician's job. Yes, you're all in the same building, but all of you are there for different reasons. All of your lives are getting enriched, but for different reasons. Knowledge is fine, but it can also give you a false sense that you know what you're doing when you don't. However, really, and this is kind of the main problem going on right now, too many people have a little bit of experience. I've talked about this in my college presentations. What do I mean? Right now, we have enough people out there in the law enforcement world with just enough disappearance experience to be dangerous. Once again, what do I mean? Most of the people who get involved who are the motivation for this topic of this entire blog have law enforcement experience. It's not like they were all accountants, then woke up one day and wanted to go on site to investigate a disappearance. They've been around horrible car crashes, domestic violence, burglaries, psychos on meth, running through the streets with machetes, all of that. However, they've probably only experienced maybe one disappearance in their law enforcement careers that went over a week unsolved. And if it got solved, it was either number one, the person committed suicide and was eventually found in some woods, or number two, the person comes home alive after going on a bender due to drugs or some relationship. Those two scenarios are 99.9% of their experience. This is why I've said many times that 99.9% of law enforcement officers will never experience the kinds of cases we feature on Unfound. Disappearances that get to being over a year old. Because what we cover are rare. Important, devastating, yet rare. But, and this is where the human ego, pride, vanity comes in, along with the lack of knowledge, because these people who get involved have filled out one or two missing persons report over law enforcement careers lasting 20 years, they think they're qualified to investigate disappearances that have lasted a long time. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Moreover, there's never any sense of humility with any of them. There doesn't seem to be any doubt in their choices, their words, their actions. Nothing but full steam ahead of, we know what we're doing, despite them having essentially zero experience in what they're doing. Why? Because their knowledge of the topic is inadequate, and their inadequate experience is misleading. Seriously, think about it this way. If all of you have ever experienced our disappearances that last less than a week, then what will be the natural inclination when you hear about a disappearance that has lasted 10 years? Damn, somebody really must have messed up that investigation. Damn, there must be a conspiracy going on with that police department to not be able to solve that disappearance. Damn, I filled out paperwork on 2 disappearances that lasted less than a week. I'm the perfect person for this 10-year-old disappearance. Does any of that sound familiar when you think of private investigators and other non-governmental investigators we've discussed on Unfound over the past 5.5 years? Yeah, of course it sounds familiar. To me, this is why we get so many crazy stories from these types of people. Because they think the only way a disappearance can last 10 years is due to some sort of manipulation by people in powerful places. Thus, there must be a cover-up going on. Or they go the opposite direction, that it was the work of multiple private people, a complex plan to cause one person to disappear. And they were just too smart for the investigators at the time. In no way do any of these people think, you know, sometimes people disappear all on their own. Yes, sometimes a person can pull off the perfect crime and cause a wife to disappear, etc. There's one more point in all of this to understand, though, and this is how disappearances are so misunderstood by the people who are legally responsible for investigating them. These retired law enforcement officers who get involved in these disappearances, these people have done their 25 years of service. They've been on the vice squad, or they've been sheriffs, or they've been homicide detectives. And on the strength of all that, they think they can investigate disappearances intelligently. The problem? Being a homicide or vice or car theft or art theft or any kind of detective does not prepare anyone to investigate disappearances. In fact, we might think about it the opposite way. If a person were to be on a missing persons squad of a large metropolitan police department for 25 years, would we then think that person would be qualified to investigate the Gardner Museum heist? Of course not. Not at all. Would that person's 25 years of experience with missing persons guide that individual to track down all the paintings that were stolen? Of course not. Then why, oh why, do we think that homicide detectives are qualified to investigate missing persons cases? It makes no sense. Each kind of crime or incident has its own qualities, its own personality, its own way about which to get the most amount of information. Homicide detectives work in the world of DNA, body examinations, and murder weapons. For disappearances, we have none of that. So then, how can retired homicide detectives help at all? They can't, unless they're willing to learn about disappearances from scratch. I would be saying this about other professions. Electrical engineers don't have the experience or knowledge to build bridges. Civil engineers do. History teachers don't have the experience to teach physics. Physics teachers do. NASCAR drivers don't have the experience or knowledge to drive Formula One cars. Formula One drivers do. So then why do we accept investigators from other disciplines coming into disappearances and insisting they know what they're doing? We shouldn't. In fact, dare I say it, they're doing more harm than good. This brings us to the final aspect of explaining all this. Pride versus truth. The first two culminate in a situation where a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing get involved in something they think is simple. They think everybody else who has worked on the disappearances so far are incompetent. They think that all it takes is looking at the police file and determining where the mistakes were made. They think that all it takes is for the experienced, quote-unquote, eyes to look over the situation and see what no one else could. Then the truth hits. They discover there are very good reasons. There are 100,000 unsolved disappearances in the United States. They discover there are very good reasons that police departments have put these cases off to the side. Why? No evidence to find. These Johnny-come-latelys discover that these are mysteries created by the facts themselves and not by people's incompetence. Moreover, these people who have no real experience suddenly discover they don't even know what they're reading when they look at missing persons files. They know English, but the words are figuratively in Chinese. They're looking for DNA evidence and weapons and everything else, but none of that is within the pages of the report. And the rationalizing starts. And they have to do that because they came in with such fanfare and arrogance. I'm going to solve this. Don't you know? This is compounded, like I said above, that these people really don't understand why disappearances happen. This is then why their rationalizing is so outrageous. It's also why their actions are so unprofessional, because really, they really don't know what they're doing. They had no experience before getting involved. They had no business getting involved. They didn't know they didn't have any experience before getting involved. And it all comes together, and who pays for it? The families who get caught up in this. Pride keeps these grifters from recognizing that they've gotten in over their heads. Like the saying goes, arrogance and self-awareness rarely go hand in hand. The problem is then, they can't just quit and walk away. Why? Because they made big promises before starting. And their pride will not allow them to say, I think I got in over my head. This is when they become quote-unquote crazy. The wild theories start, the accusations, the dirtying of people who surely had nothing to do with the disappearance. Maybe even the dirtying of the missing person himself or herself. Maybe. Ed, why don't the families automatically kick these people out? Why don't families distance themselves from these people as soon as it all goes bad? Lots of reasons. First, these families are desperate. This is what allows grifters to get involved in the first place. Second, these families have their pride too. So they also have a hard time admitting they made a horrible decision. Third, some of these families actually start believing the crap that these grifters put out. Fourth, many of these families think that if this investigator isn't working for them, then nobody will. Which may be true, but no work is better than bad work. But do you notice there is a word that I have not yet typed in this blog/newsletter that you would think would be right in the middle of all of this? Money. Don't get me wrong, this certainly plays a role. There are certainly swindlers of the swindling type out there. However, much of what I described above rarely has anything to do with money. What I'm saying is a lot of these people who have no idea what they're doing are doing this for free. Why? Because they're in it for the glory and the prestige and all that. These people can do damage, though, without a penny ever exchanging hands. In fact, this is what I've said about psychics as well. Just because they want to work for a family for free does not make the situation any better. Why? Because they have no answers, and all they do is cloud the entire disappearance. What eventually happens? Well, eventually the public gets burned out on the sensationalism that these types of people provide. A good example would be Mara Murray's disappearance. It has significantly decreased in exposure since 10 years ago. Why? My opinion is most good people who were genuinely interested just got fed up with all the idiots cyber squatting on her case. This decrease in attention then allows the grifters to slink away without many eyeballs on them. They then move on to the next disappearance investigation they can ruin. Then what can be done about this? Several things. Families, don't be so desperate as to accept help from just anyone. Moreover, do not be overwhelmed by some retired investigator's resume. Why? Because it will probably have zero disappearance experience on it, and that's all that matters. 2, the public has to know these bad people when they hear them. A light bulb needs to immediately go off that says, this guy is full of it. Not enough of that is happening right now. And number 3, disappearance education needs to be part of all criminal justice programs. Because we must think of it this way. We don't want disappearances to happen. However, they will. But the more education that police officers can have, then either on the job or in retirement, they can help families in an educated and professional way. And they are less likely to be idiots. Because right now, there are not enough educated and experienced people to drown out all the fakers. That's all I got for this blog and newsletter. Talk to you next week.